Hey family. Just wanted to take a moment to say a massive thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your comments, support, and loyalty mean absolutely everything to me. I see you showing up video after video, sharing your thoughts, and making this community what it is. This channel wouldn't be the same without each and every one of you. Your enthusiasm keeps me motivated, and I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend your time here. Much love to you all. Red Heart. She stood in the rain, tears mixing with the drops running down her face. The expensive restaurant behind her glowed with warm light, but she wasn't welcome there anymore. Not after what just happened. Her thin dress clung to her body, completely soaked, and her shoes were ruined. But that was the least of her worries. She had just lost her job, the only thing keeping her and her sick mother from being evicted from their tiny apartment. The restaurant manager had fired her in front of everyone when she accidentally spilled wine on an important customer. She didn't mean to do it, the tray was heavy and the customer moved suddenly. But it didn't matter. She was done. "Are you okay?" a deep voice asked from behind her. She turned around, wiping her eyes quickly. A tall man stood there, holding an umbrella over her. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. His eyes were concerned, which surprised her. People like him didn't usually notice people like her. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice cracking. "Just waiting for the bus." "In this rain? Without an umbrella?" He didn't believe her. "You're shivering." She couldn't argue with that. Her teeth were chattering and she felt cold to her bones. "My car is right there," he pointed to a sleek black vehicle parked nearby. "Let me give you a ride home." "I don't get in cars with strangers," she said, trying to sound firm despite her situation. He smiled and something about it made her heart skip. "I'm Alexander. Now I'm not a stranger anymore." "That's not how it works," she said, but found herself smiling back. There was something about him that felt safe, despite his obvious wealth and power. "At least take my jacket while you wait," he said, removing his expensive suit jacket and holding it out to her. She hesitated, then took it. The warmth enveloped her immediately, and she caught a whiff of his cologne, subtle but expensive. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You worked in there, didn't you?" he asked, nodding toward the restaurant. "I saw what happened." Her cheeks burned with shame. "Yes. Not anymore though." "That manager was completely out of line," Alexander said, his jaw tightening. "It wasn't your fault." She looked up at him in surprise. "You saw? I was there for a business dinner. Though I lost my appetite after witnessing that scene." He studied her face. "What's your name?" "Elizabeth," she answered. "Everyone calls me Beth." "Well, Beth, I think you need a new job. And I might be able to help with that." She looked at him suspiciously. She'd heard offers like this before, and they never ended well for girls like her. "I'm not interested in that kind of work," she said firmly. Alexander looked confused, then his expression cleared as he realized what she meant. "No, nothing like that. I run a company, Reynolds Enterprises. We're looking for an assistant in the community outreach department. It's entry-level but pays well." Beth stared at him, trying to process this unexpected turn of events. "Why would you offer me a job? You don't know anything about me. I know you worked hard in there. I could see it. And I know you didn't deserve what happened." He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. "Think about it. Come to this address tomorrow at 9 a.m. if you're interested." The bus finally arrived, its headlights cutting through the rain. Beth clutched the card tightly. "Your jacket," she said, starting to remove it. "Keep it for now," he said with a smile. "You can return it tomorrow. If you come." As she boarded the bus, Beth looked back at Alexander. He stood in the rain watching her go. She had no idea that this chance meeting would change everything. The apartment was dark when Beth arrived home. She tried to be quiet as she entered, hoping not to wake her mother. After hanging Alexander's jacket carefully on a chair, she checked on her mom, who was asleep in the small bedroom they shared. Her mother's face was peaceful for once, the pain lines smoothed out in sleep. The medication was working today. Beth felt tears well up again. Without her job, they wouldn't be able to afford the next refill. The eviction notice on their door gave them just 2 weeks. Beth sat at their small kitchen table and looked at Alexander's business card under the dim light. Reynolds Enterprises, one of the biggest companies in the city. And Alexander Reynolds was the CEO, not just some manager like she had assumed. She'd seen his face in the business section of newspapers left on the bus. Why would someone like him offer someone like her a job? It didn't make sense. There had to be a catch. Men like him didn't just help people like her without wanting something in return. But what choice did she have? Their savings were almost gone. Her mother needed her medication. And the rent was due. She set her alarm for 7 a.m. She would go to the interview tomorrow. She would wear her only nice outfit, a simple blue dress she'd bought secondhand for other job interviews. She would bring his jacket back, thank him for his kindness, and see if the job offer was real. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Beth couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change her life forever. She just didn't know if it would be for better or worse. The Reynolds Enterprises building stretched toward the sky, all glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun. Beth stood across the street, clutching Alexander's jacket and feeling very small. People in business suits streamed in and out, all looking important and purposeful. She had spent an hour getting ready, doing her best with what little she had. The blue dress was clean and pressed, her hair was neatly pulled back, and she wore her only pair of decent shoes. But standing here now, she felt hopelessly out of place. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, thinking of her mother who had been so excited when Beth told her about the potential job. The hope in her mom's eyes had been enough to give Beth courage. Taking a deep breath, she crossed the street and walked through the grand entrance. The security guard looked at her suspiciously. "I have an appointment with Mr. Reynolds," she said, trying to sound confident. "My name is Elizabeth." The guard made a call, and to Beth's surprise, she was directed to the elevator. "Top floor," he said, looking slightly more respectful. The elevator rose smoothly, her stomach dropping with nerves. When the doors opened, she stepped into a reception area decorated in tasteful grays and blues. "You must be Elizabeth," a friendly woman at the desk greeted her. "Mr. Reynolds is expecting you. Go right in." Beth walked toward the double doors, her heart pounding. Before she could knock, they opened, and Alexander stood there, looking even more impressive than he had the night before. His suit was perfectly tailored, his dark hair neatly styled, and his smile warm when he saw her. "Beth, you came," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Come in." His office was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city. Beth could see her neighborhood in the distance, the contrast between that world and this one stark and unsettling. "Your jacket," she said, holding it out. "Thank you for lending it to me." "Of course," he replied, taking it and gesturing for her to sit in one of the comfortable chairs facing his desk. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," she said, though her nerves were making her stomach twist. "Thank you for the job interview opportunity." Alexander sat down across from her. "Before we discuss the position, I want to apologize for what happened at the restaurant. I spoke with the owner this morning. That manager has been reprimanded for his behavior." Beth's eyes widened. "You didn't have to do that." "I did. It was unprofessional and cruel." He leaned forward. "Now, about the position I mentioned. It's in our community outreach department. We're starting several initiatives to help underserved neighborhoods, including the one you live in." Her surprise must have shown on her face because he smiled. "I saw which bus you took. I know the area well. In fact, it's one of the neighborhoods we're focusing on." "What would I be doing?" Beth asked. "Coordinating with local organizations, helping set up programs, managing communications. It's an important role, Beth. We need someone who understands the community's needs." It sounded perfect, almost too perfect. Beth couldn't help but be suspicious. "Why me?" she asked directly. "You must have hundreds of qualified applicants." Alexander studied her for a moment. "Because you have something they don't. First-hand experience. You know what it's like to struggle. To need help. That perspective is invaluable." His words made sense, but Beth still felt there was something he wasn't saying. "The salary is substantial," he continued, sliding a paper across the desk. Beth looked down and nearly gasped. The number was more than triple what she'd made at the restaurant. "This can't be right," she said. "It is. Along with full benefits, including health insurance." Alexander's expression became serious. "I know about your mother, Beth. Her medication is expensive." Now she was truly alarmed. "How do you know about my mother?" "I had my team do a background check this morning. Standard procedure for all potential employees." He held up his hands when he saw her expression. "I apologize if that feels invasive. But it confirmed what I already believed, you're exactly who we need for this position." Beth didn't know what to say. The salary would solve all their problems. They could afford her mother's treatment, pay the rent, maybe even move to a better place eventually. But something still felt off. "What's the catch?" she asked bluntly. Alexander looked surprised, then laughed. "No catch. Just hard work and dedication. The job won't be easy, Beth. You'll be dealing with complicated issues and working long hours sometimes." "I'm not afraid of hard work," she said firmly. "I know you're not. That's why I want to hire you." He stood up and walked to the window. There's one more thing. The job comes with an apartment in the company building for the first year. It's to help you get established. It has 2 bedrooms so your mother would be comfortable there. Beth couldn't believe what she was hearing. It was like he was offering her everything she had ever dreamed of, which made her trust it even less. Why are you really doing this? She asked, standing up too. People like you don't just help people like me without wanting something in return. Alexander turned to face her, his expression unreadable. What do you think I want? The question hung in the air between them. Beth felt her cheeks grow warm. I don't know, she admitted. But there's always a price. His eyes softened. Not always, Beth. Sometimes people just want to do the right thing. She wanted to believe him. Desperately. But life had taught her to be cautious. I need time to think about it, she said finally. Of course. He nodded. Take the weekend. The position is yours if you want it. Start Monday? Beth nodded, still dazed by the whole situation. Let me show you the apartment, he said. So you can consider all aspects of the offer. They took the elevator down a few floors and Alexander led her to a door at the end of a quiet hallway. When he opened it, Beth couldn't hold back her gasp. The apartment was beautiful. Spacious and bright, with new furniture and large windows. It was bigger than any place she'd ever lived. The second bedroom is through there, Alexander said, pointing. Perfect for your mother. And there's a nurse on staff in the building who could check on her when needed. Beth walked slowly through the rooms, trying to imagine living here. It seemed impossible, like a dream she might wake up from at any moment. Why do I feel like Cinderella? She murmured, more to herself than to him. Alexander smiled. Does that make me the prince or the fairy godmother? Despite her nerves, Beth laughed. I'm not sure yet. As they returned to the lobby, Beth felt overwhelmed by the decision ahead of her. Her practical side said to take the job immediately, it would solve all their problems. But another part of her remained wary. Thank you for the opportunity, she said formally as they reached the entrance. Thank you for considering it, Alexander replied. He handed her another card. My personal number. Call me anytime if you have questions. As Beth walked away from the building, she felt Alexander watching her. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his interest in her than just filling a job position. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out what it was. Beth's mother cried when she told her about the job offer and the apartment. Not sad tears, but the kind that come from relief after years of struggle. It's like a miracle, her mother said, holding Beth's hands tightly. After everything we've been through. Beth had spent the weekend wrestling with her decision. She'd researched Reynolds Enterprises, learning about their legitimate community programs and their reputation as a good employer. Everything seemed above board. Still, the offer felt too good to be true. What if there's something he's not telling me? Beth asked her mother. Her mother's eyes, tired but wise, studied her face. Does he seem like a bad person to you? Beth thought about Alexander's kindness in the rain, the way he'd stood up for her against the restaurant manager, how he seemed to genuinely care about helping her community. No, she admitted. He seems good. Different from what I'd expect from someone so rich and powerful. Then maybe this is just what it seems, a good opportunity from a good person. Her mother squeezed her hands. Sometimes good things do happen, Beth. By Sunday night, Beth had made her decision. She called the number Alexander had given her. I'd like to accept the position, she told him when he answered. I'm glad, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I'll have someone help you and your mother move in tomorrow morning. Monday dawned bright and clear, as if the universe was approving of her choice. A car came to pick them up and movers carefully packed their few belongings. By noon, they were settled in the new apartment. Beth's mother couldn't stop touching the soft furniture and looking out the large windows. I never thought I'd live somewhere like this, she said quietly. Beth hugged her. You deserve this, Mom. After everything. After making sure her mother was comfortable, Beth went upstairs to Alexander's office for her first day of work. She wore the blue dress again, lacking anything more professional. Alexander's assistant greeted her warmly. Mr. Reynolds asked me to take you shopping for work clothes this afternoon. Company expense. Beth blinked in surprise. That's not necessary. Standard for new employees in your position, the woman assured her. Mr. Reynolds wants you to feel comfortable representing the company. Before Beth could respond, Alexander emerged from his office. Beth, welcome, he said, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. Ready for your first day? She nodded, trying to look confident despite her nerves. Absolutely. I've arranged for you to meet the community outreach team this morning. Then Diane will take you shopping for a work wardrobe. He must have seen her discomfort because he added, it's part of your employment package. Everyone in your position gets the same benefit. The morning passed in a whirlwind of introductions and information. The community outreach team was friendly and passionate about their work. Beth was surprised to find that the job was exactly as Alexander had described it, real work aimed at making a difference in struggling neighborhoods. As promised, Diane took her shopping that afternoon. Beth had never been in the kind of stores they visited, where salespeople brought clothes to private dressing rooms and no price tags were visible. Get whatever you need, Diane encouraged her. Mr. Reynolds was very clear about that. By the end of the day, Beth had a complete professional wardrobe: suits, dresses, blouses, shoes, even a warm coat for the coming winter. She felt guilty about the expense until Diane explained that all executives and public-facing employees received the same benefit. When she returned to the apartment, she found her mother looking better than she had in months. A doctor had visited while Beth was gone, bringing new medications and arranging regular checkups. He said Mr. Reynolds arranged everything, her mother told her. The company's health insurance covers it all. Beth sat down, overwhelmed by the day's events. Everything was happening so fast. Their lives had completely transformed in just 3 days. Do you think I made the right decision? She asked her mother. Look around you, her mother replied. Look at the color in my cheeks. I think you know the answer. That night, as Beth was getting ready for bed, her phone pinged with a message from Alexander. How was your first day? He asked. Overwhelming but good, she replied honestly. Thank you for everything. You earned it. Get some rest. Tomorrow, I'd like you to join me for a meeting with community leaders from your old neighborhood. Beth smiled at the phone. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her luck had truly changed. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of activity. Beth threw herself into her work, determined to prove that Alexander hadn't made a mistake in hiring her. She attended meetings, wrote proposals, and visited community centers in neighborhoods like the one she'd grown up in. To her surprise, she was good at the job. Growing up poor had given her insights that her wealthier colleagues lacked. She understood the pride that came with struggle, the resistance to charity, the need for opportunity rather than handouts. Community leaders responded to her authenticity, and programs began to gain traction. Alexander noticed. He began inviting her to more important meetings, asking for her input on larger initiatives. Sometimes she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, his expression thoughtful. One evening, after a particularly successful presentation to potential donors, Alexander asked her to stay behind after the others left. You're doing remarkable work, Beth, he said, leaning against the conference table. Better than I even hoped. Thank you, she said, feeling a flush of pride. I love what we're doing. I can tell. He smiled. That's why people respond to you. Your passion is genuine. There was a moment of silence between them, comfortable yet charged with something Beth couldn't quite name. Would you have dinner with me tonight? Alexander asked suddenly. To celebrate your first month? Beth froze. Was this a work dinner or something else? The line between professional and personal had been clear until now. Just dinner, he added as if reading her thoughts. At a restaurant of your choosing. Beth thought about it. She enjoyed Alexander's company. Over the past month, they developed an easy rapport, talking about work but also books, films, and ideas. He treated her as an equal, valuing her opinions and never making her feel less because of her background. Okay, she agreed. But somewhere casual. No fancy restaurants. Alexander smiled. Your choice. I'll meet you downstairs at 7. As Beth walked back to her office, she tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach. This was just a work dinner, she told herself. Nothing more. But deep down she wasn't sure she believed it. Beth chose a small Italian restaurant in a middle-class neighborhood, nice enough for a celebration but not so fancy that she'd feel out of place. When she told Alexander her choice, his eyebrows raised slightly in surprise, but he just smiled and said it sounded perfect. She changed into one of her new dresses after work, a simple navy blue one that was professional but flattering. As she applied a touch of mascara and lip gloss, she told herself again that this was just a friendly work dinner. But the butterflies in her stomach suggested otherwise. Alexander was waiting in the lobby when she came down, looking different in casual clothes, dark jeans and a light sweater that made him seem more approachable, less like the powerful CEO everyone knew. You look lovely, he said, his eyes warm as they met hers. Thank you, she replied, feeling suddenly shy. So do you? Different but nice. They took his car, a sleek but not flashy sedan that he drove himself. Beth was surprised she'd expected a driver. "I like to drive," he explained when she mentioned it. "It's one of the few times I feel completely in control." The restaurant was busy but not crowded, with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. The host recognized Alexander immediately, despite his casual attire, and led them to a quiet corner table. "You've been here before?" Beth asked once they were seated. "A few times. It's one of the best-kept secrets in the city." Alexander picked up his menu. Their pasta is made fresh daily. They ordered wine and food, the conversation flowing easily. Alexander asked about her mother's health, genuinely interested in her improvement. Beth found herself relaxing, enjoying his company outside the office setting. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said after their entrees arrived. "Of course. Why aren't you married? You're successful, kind, not terrible to look at." She blushed as soon as the words left her mouth. Alexander laughed. "Not terrible to look at? Such high praise." "You know what I mean," she said, embarrassed but smiling. "I was engaged once," he said, his expression growing more serious. "About 5 years ago. It didn't work out." "What happened?" Beth asked, then quickly added, "If you don't mind telling me." Alexander twirled pasta around his fork, considering his answer. "She wanted the idea of me more than the reality. The wealthy businessman, the social status. When she realized how much I work, how much I care about things beyond just making money, she decided I wasn't what she wanted after all." "I'm sorry," Beth said sincerely. He shrugged. "Don't be. It was for the best. Better to find out before the wedding than after." He took a sip of wine. "What about you? No boyfriend wondering why you're having dinner with your boss?" Beth shook her head. "No time for dating when you're working 2 jobs and taking care of a sick parent." "And now?" Alexander asked, his eyes holding hers. The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Beth felt her heart rate quicken. "Now I'm focused on doing well in my new job," she said carefully. "A job you're excelling at," he replied. "Everyone on the team is impressed with your work." The conversation shifted to safer ground work projects, plans for new initiatives. By the time they finished dessert, Beth felt both relieved and slightly disappointed that the moment of tension had passed. Outside, the night had turned cool, and Beth wrapped her arms around herself as they walked to his car. "Here," Alexander said, shrugging off his jacket and placing it around her shoulders, just as he had that first rainy night. The gesture reminded Beth of how they'd met, how far she'd come in such a short time. She looked up at Alexander, standing close to her now, and felt a rush of gratitude and something more complicated. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for the jacket. For everything. You changed my life." "You're changing it yourself," he corrected her. "I just opened a door. You're the one walking through it, doing the work, making a difference." His face was serious, his eyes intent on hers. Beth felt drawn to him, the space between them charged with unspoken feelings. Alexander took a step back, breaking the moment. "We should get you home. Big day tomorrow with the new youth center proposal." The drive back was quiet, both of them lost in their thoughts. When they reached their building, Alexander walked her to her apartment door. "Thank you for dinner," Beth said, standing in her doorway. "Thank you for your company," he replied. For a moment it seemed like he might say something more, but instead he just smiled. "Good night, Beth." "Good night, Alexander." As she closed the door, Beth leaned against it, her heart racing. Something had shifted between them tonight, though neither had acknowledged it directly. She wasn't sure what it meant or what would happen next, but for the first time she allowed herself to admit the truth. She was falling for Alexander Reynolds. The next morning, Beth arrived at work early, determined to focus on the youth center proposal rather than her confused feelings. But when she reached her office, a small package waited on her desk with a note. "Thought you might need this today." Inside was a beautiful fountain pen. Beth remembered mentioning during dinner that she'd always wanted one but could never justify the expense. She held the pen, tracing its smooth surface with her fingers. It was a thoughtful gift, but it blurred the lines between them even further. Was it a gift from her boss or from something more? Before she could decide how she felt about it, her phone rang. It was Alexander's assistant. "Mr. Reynolds would like to see you in his office," she said. Beth's stomach tightened with nerves as she rode the elevator to the top floor. Had she crossed a line last night? Was he going to remind her of their professional relationship? Alexander was standing by the window when she entered his office, his back to the door. He turned when he heard her, his expression serious. "Beth," he said, his voice formal. Please close the door. She did as he asked, her anxiety mounting. Is something wrong? No, he said, then hesitated. Yes, maybe. He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I've been thinking about last night. Me too, Beth admitted. I want to thank you for the pen. It was very thoughtful. It's just a pen, he said dismissively. Beth, I need to be honest with you. My interest in you has become personal. And that puts us in a complicated position. Beth's heart raced. He was saying what she'd been thinking, bringing their unspoken feelings into the open. Because you're my boss, she said. Yes. The power dynamic makes any relationship between us problematic. He moved away from the window, closer to her. I value your work too much to jeopardize your position here. But I can't deny how I feel. How do you feel? Beth asked quietly. Alexander's eyes held hers. Like I've been waiting to meet you my whole life. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable in a way Beth hadn't expected from him. I feel the same way, she admitted. But I'm scared. Everything in my life has changed so quickly. My job, my mother's health, where we live, it's all because of you. That creates its own kind of imbalance. Alexander nodded. I understand that. Which is why I've been thinking about a solution. What kind of solution? A transfer. To another department. You'd still work on community projects, but you'd report to someone else. We'd remove the direct professional relationship between us. Beth considered this. It was a practical solution to their dilemma, but it also meant acknowledging that something was happening between them, something worth restructuring their work lives for. Is that what you want? She asked. Alexander stepped closer. What I want is to see where this connection between us leads, without work complications or power imbalances getting in the way. He was close enough now that Beth could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. I want that too, she whispered. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, Alexander reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. We should take this slowly, he said, his voice low. Do things right. Beth nodded, her skin tingling where he'd touched her. Slowly, she agreed, though everything inside her was rushing forward. Alexander stepped back, visibly collecting himself. I'll speak to HR about the transfer today. Until it's official, we should keep things professional. Of course, Beth said, trying to calm her racing heart. As she turned to leave, Alexander called her name. Beth. She looked back at him. Would you have dinner with me again tomorrow night? Not as your boss, but as a man asking a woman he admires on a proper date. A smile spread across Beth's face. Yes, she said. I'd like that very much. Walking back to her office, Beth felt lighter than she had in years. For so long, her life had been about survival, about getting through each day. Now, suddenly, it was about possibility, about hope, about the chance of something she'd never dared to dream of. But a small voice in the back of her mind reminded her to be cautious. Things that seemed too good to be true often were. And despite Alexander's obvious sincerity, she couldn't help wondering if there was more to his interest in her than he was saying. The transfer happened quickly. By Friday, Beth had moved to a new office on a different floor, reporting to the director of special projects rather than directly to Alexander. Her colleagues seemed unsurprised by the change, which made Beth wonder if they had suspected Alexander's interest in her all along. Friday night was their first official date. Alexander took her to a quiet restaurant outside the city, where they were less likely to be recognized. They talked for hours, sharing stories from their childhoods, their hopes, their disappointments. Beth learned that despite his wealth, Alexander had faced his own struggles, the early death of his father, the pressure of taking over the family business at just 25, the loneliness of a position that separated him from others. People see the money and the power, he told her. They don't see the person underneath. I see you, Beth said simply, reaching across the table to take his hand. Their relationship developed slowly over the next few weeks as promised. Dinners, walks in the park, a Sunday sailing on Alexander's boat. He was always a gentleman, respectful of her boundaries, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. And Beth found herself falling deeper in love with him each day. Her work continued to flourish in her new position. Her mother's health improved dramatically with proper care and reduced stress. For the first time in her life, Beth felt like everything was finally going right. Until the night of the charity gala. It was a major event, raising funds for the community programs Beth had helped develop. As a key team member, she was expected to attend, wearing a beautiful gown Alexander had insisted on buying for her. He would be there too, of course, but they had agreed to maintain professional distance in public until their relationship was more established. The ballroom was magnificent, filled with the city's elite in designer clothes and sparkling jewelry. Beth felt out of place despite her elegant dress and the confidence she'd gained in recent months. These people had been born into this world, she was just visiting. She was speaking with a donor about the youth center when she overheard a conversation from a nearby group. "Reynolds certainly found himself a pretty new toy," a woman's voice said with a laugh. "Though this one's more interesting than his usual type." "You mean poorer?" a man replied. "I heard he literally picked her up off the street." "Well, that's his pattern, isn't it?" the woman continued. "Find some charity case, save her, enjoy her gratitude until he gets bored, then move on to the next one." Beth froze, her glass nearly slipping from her fingers. The donor she'd been speaking with looked uncomfortable and excused himself, leaving her alone to absorb what she'd just heard. She scanned the room and found Alexander across the ballroom, handsome in his tuxedo, talking animatedly with a group of investors. He caught her eye and smiled, but his expression changed to concern when he saw her face. Beth turned away, needing space to think. She walked quickly toward the terrace doors, pushing through them into the cool night air. Her mind was racing. What had they meant by his pattern? Had there been others before her? Other women he'd saved, and then discarded? She heard the door open behind her. "Beth." Alexander's voice was concerned. "What's wrong?" She turned to face him, her emotions a tangle of hurt and confusion. "Is this what you do? Find desperate women, help them, date them, then move on when you get bored?" His face registered shock, then understanding, then anger. "Who said that to you? Does it matter? Is it true?" Her voice was quiet but intense. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of stress. "No. Not the way you're thinking." "Explain it to me then," she said, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warm evening. Alexander sighed, leaning against the terrace railing. "I've dated women I've met through my charitable work before. Women who needed help, who I was able to help. But it wasn't calculated, Beth. And it wasn't a pattern of using them." "How many?" she asked. "Two," he admitted after a pause. "Before you. But those relationships were different." "Different how?" "They wanted what I could give them more than they wanted me." His eyes met hers, open and vulnerable. "With you it's not like that. You challenge me. You care about the work itself, not just what it can do for you. You see past the money and the position to the person I really am." Beth wanted to believe him. The past weeks had shown her a man who was thoughtful, kind, passionate about making a difference. But doubt had crept in, poisoning her trust. "Why didn't you tell me about the others?" she asked. "I should have," he acknowledged. "I didn't want you to think what you're thinking now, that you're just part of some pattern. Because you're not, Beth. What I feel for you is real. Different from anything I've felt before." Beth turned away, looking out at the city lights. She needed to think, to sort through her feelings without the distraction of his presence, his earnest eyes. "What happened to them?" "The other women?" she asked quietly. Alexander was silent for a moment. "The first one, Jessica, met someone else. Someone closer to her age, from her world. She's married now, has kids. The second, Claire. She decided what she wanted was the lifestyle, not me. Last I heard, she was dating a tech CEO in California." "So they left you," Beth said, turning back to face him. "Yes. And now you're worried I'll leave too?" Alexander's expression was pained. "The thought has crossed my mind. Why wouldn't it? What can I possibly offer that would keep someone like you? Someone real, genuine, who doesn't care about the money or the status." His vulnerability touched something in Beth. For all his wealth and power, Alexander was just as insecure as she was, just as afraid of being wanted for the wrong reasons. "I need time," she said finally, "to think about all this." He nodded, respecting her space though she could see it cost him. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." Beth went home early from the gala, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. Her mother was already asleep, so she slipped quietly into her room and sat on the edge of her bed, still in her beautiful gown. Had she been naive? Had she allowed herself to be swept away by the fairy tale without questioning it? Or was what they had real, despite Alexander's past? She thought about Alexander's kindness, not just to her but to others. How he treated the maintenance staff with the same respect as his executives. How he remembered people's names, their stories. How his eyes lit up when talking about the community projects they were working on. Those weren't the actions of someone just looking for gratitude or admiration. They were the actions of a genuinely good person who happened to be wealthy. But doubt, once planted, was hard to uproot. Beth slept poorly that night, and in the morning she made a decision. She needed to talk to one of these women, to hear their side of the story. Using the company database, which she still had access to despite her transfer, Beth found Jessica Thompson's contact information. She had worked for Reynolds Enterprises 5 years ago in the marketing department. Now she ran her own small business. Beth called and arranged to meet her for coffee, saying only that she worked for Reynolds and wanted to discuss a potential collaboration. It wasn't entirely a lie. Beth did have authority to form partnerships with local businesses for community projects. Jessica was in her mid-30s, pretty with a warm smile. She arrived at the coffee shop with her young daughter in tow, apologizing for having to bring her along. "My babysitter canceled last minute," she explained, setting up the little girl with a coloring book at their table. Beth smiled at the child, then looked at Jessica. "Thank you for meeting me. I'm Beth Carson from Reynolds Enterprises Community Outreach." "Nice to meet you," Jessica said. "Though I'm curious why you wanted to talk. My business is pretty small for a Reynolds partnership." Beth took a deep breath. "Actually, that's not why I asked to meet you. It's about Alexander Reynolds." Jessica's eyebrows raised. "Alex? Are you and he?" "It's complicated," Beth admitted. "I heard that you and he were involved once." Jessica studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "We dated briefly, yes. About 5 years ago." "I need to know, what kind of man is he really?" Beth asked, hating how vulnerable the question made her feel. Jessica's expression softened. "He's a good man, Beth. One of the best I've known. Is something wrong?" "I heard some people talking at a gala. They made it sound like Alexander has a pattern of finding vulnerable women, helping them, dating them, then moving on." Jessica laughed, the sound genuinely amused. "Is that what they're saying now?" "Trust me, if anyone did the moving on, it was me." "What happened?" Beth asked. Jessica looked at her daughter, then back at Beth. "I met Alex when I was going through a rough time. Recent divorce, struggling to keep my marketing job because of childcare issues. He created a flexible position for me, mentored me, helped me get back on my feet. And yes, we started dating. And then I realized I wanted different things. Alex works constantly. He's devoted to his company, to his causes. I needed someone more present. And I met David, my current husband, who was willing to be that person." Jessica smiled. Alex was understanding. Hurt but understanding. "He even came to our wedding." Relief flooded through Beth. It matched what Alexander had told her. He didn't make you feel obligated? Because of his help?" "God, no," Jessica said firmly. "If anything, he was overly careful about that. Always making sure I knew my job was secure regardless of our personal relationship." She tilted her head, studying Beth. "He's in love with you, isn't he?" Beth felt her cheeks warm. "I think so. And I care for him too." "But you're worried about the power imbalance," Jessica guessed. "About whether your feelings are real or just gratitude." "Yes," Beth admitted. "Exactly." "Listen," Jessica leaned forward. "Only you can answer that question. But I can tell you this, Alex deserves someone who loves him for himself, not his money or what he can do for them. If that's you, don't let other people's gossip ruin it." As Beth left the coffee shop, she felt lighter. The conversation with Jessica had confirmed what her heart already knew: Alexander was genuine. Their connection was real. She pulled out her phone and texted him, "Can we talk tonight?" His reply came immediately, "Name the time and place." They met at a small park near their building, neutral ground where they could talk privately. Alexander was already waiting when Beth arrived, sitting on a bench, looking more casual than she'd ever seen him, in jeans and a simple sweater. He stood when he saw her, his expression cautious but hopeful. "Thank you for meeting me." Beth sat beside him on the bench, leaving a small space between them. "I met with Jessica Thompson today." Alexander's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You did?" "I needed to hear her perspective. To understand if what we have is real." "And?" His voice was carefully controlled, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "She said you're a good man. That you didn't pressure her or make her feel obligated." Beth turned to face him more directly. "She said you deserve someone who loves you for yourself, not what you can do for them." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "Do you think you could be that person, Beth?" "I think I already am," she said softly. "When I'm with you, I don't see the billionaire CEO. I see the man who stood in the rain to help a stranger, who gets excited about building youth centers, who treats everyone with respect from cleaning staff to executives. She reached for his hand, taking it in both of hers. The money, the position, those things don't matter to me. They never did. What matters is who you are, Alexander. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. I've been afraid to tell you how I really feel. Afraid it would scare you away. Tell me now, Beth encouraged. I'm in love with you, Beth, he said simply. Completely, utterly in love with you. From that first night in the rain, there was something about you that called to me. Your strength, your dignity despite your circumstances, your care for your mother. And every day since then I've fallen deeper. Beth felt tears form in her eyes. I love you too, Alexander. I tried to fight it, to be practical and cautious. But my heart wouldn't listen. He reached up to cup her face, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped. We can take this as slowly as you need. I'm not going anywhere. I don't want slow anymore, Beth said, surprising herself with her certainty. I've spent my whole life being careful, being practical, doing what I had to do to survive. For once, I want to follow my heart completely. Alexander's eyes darkened. Are you sure? In answer, Beth leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as years of loneliness and caution melted away in the warmth between them. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, and she felt truly, completely safe for the first time in her adult life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. I've been waiting to do that since that first night. Beth smiled, feeling a happiness so intense it was almost painful. Me too. They walked back to their building hand in hand, no longer concerned about who might see them together. In the elevator, Alexander kissed her again, more urgently this time. Come to my place? He asked, his voice husky. Beth hesitated. This was all happening so fast. But hadn't she just said she was tired of being cautious? Yes, she said. But Alexander, you should know. I've never. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're a virgin? She nodded, feeling suddenly shy. There was never time for relationships. And then, when there was, it never felt right with anyone. Until you. Alexander kissed her forehead gently. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for, Beth. Just being with you is enough for me. But as he led her into his penthouse apartment, Beth knew what she wanted. It wasn't just physical desire, though that was certainly part of it. It was a deeper need to connect with him completely, to give herself to someone she trusted with her whole heart. His apartment was beautiful but not ostentatious, warm colors, comfortable furniture, walls lined with books. It reflected the man she'd come to know, not the wealthy image he presented to the world. Alexander poured them each a glass of wine, his movements precise but slightly nervous, as if he too felt the significance of the moment. Tell me about the first time you saw me, Beth said, taking a sip of her wine. What made you stop in the rain that night? Alexander considered her question. You looked so proud, even standing there soaking wet after being humiliated. Not broken, just wounded but dignified. I couldn't just walk past you. Something told me you were important. Important to your charity work? She asked, needing to understand. No, he shook his head. Important to me. I didn't understand it then, but I think on some level I recognized you. Like my soul knew yours. His words sent a shiver through her. I felt it too. Even though I was suspicious of your help, there was something about you that felt safe. Familiar almost. Alexander moved closer to her on the couch, taking her wine glass and setting it aside. Beth, he said softly, tracing her cheek with his fingertips. I want you to know that whatever happens tonight or doesn't happen, my feelings won't change. There's no rush, no pressure. Beth placed her hand over his. I know. That's one of the reasons I'm sure. She leaned forward, kissing him softly. I want this, Alexander. I want you. His eyes darkened and he pulled her closer, his kisses becoming more urgent. Beth felt herself responding, all her doubts and fears melting away in the heat between them. This was right. He was right. When he picked her up and carried her to his bedroom, she wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling both nervous and thrillingly alive. The room was dimly lit, the bed large and inviting. Alexander laid her down gently, looking at her with such tenderness that she felt tears spring to her eyes again. You're so beautiful, he whispered. Not just outside but inside. Your strength, your heart, you're extraordinary, Beth. So are you, she replied, pulling him down to her. What followed was everything she had dreamed of and more. Alexander was patient, gentle, guiding her through each new sensation with loving care. When discomfort came, He soothed it away with tender touches and whispered words of encouragement. And when pleasure replaced the pain, it was more intense than she had imagined possible. Afterward, lying in his arms, Beth felt transformed. Not just physically but emotionally, as if some final wall between them had crumbled away. "Are you okay?" Alexander asked, stroking her hair. "More than okay," she said, smiling up at him. "I feel complete. Like I've found the missing piece of myself." He kissed her softly. "That's exactly how I feel. Like I've been waiting for you my whole life without knowing it." They talked late into the night, making plans, sharing dreams, building a future together in their words. When Beth finally drifted off to sleep in his arms, she felt utterly, completely content. But one small worry nagged at the edge of her consciousness, a feeling that their newfound happiness was too perfect, too complete. And in her experience, when things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. Beth awoke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the weight of an arm draped over her waist. For a moment, she was disoriented, then the memories of the night before flooded back, bringing a warm blush to her cheeks. She turned carefully to look at Alexander, still sleeping peacefully beside her. In sleep, he looked younger, the lines of responsibility smoothed from his face. Beth studied him, still hardly believing that this extraordinary man loved her. As if sensing her gaze, Alexander's eyes opened, focusing on her with immediate warmth. "Good morning," he said, his voice husky with sleep. "Good morning," she replied, suddenly shy despite their intimacy the night before. He reached out to touch her face. "No regrets." "None," she assured him. "You? Only that we didn't find each other sooner." He pulled her closer, kissing her softly. "Breakfast." They spent the weekend in a bubble of new love, hardly leaving his apartment except for a brief visit to check on Beth's mother. They cooked together, talked for hours, made love with increasing confidence and abandon. By Sunday night, when Beth reluctantly returned to her own apartment to prepare for the work week, she felt like a different person, more confident, more complete. "I love you," Alexander said at her door, holding her close. "I love you too," she replied, the words still new and thrilling on her tongue. Monday morning brought reality back into sharp focus. Beth arrived at work to find her new department buzzing with tension. Funding for one of their major projects had been unexpectedly cut, putting months of work in jeopardy. The board voted Friday afternoon, her new boss explained grimly. 3 of the members think the money would be better spent on international expansion. Beth thought of the community center they'd been planning, of the families who would benefit from it. "Can we appeal the decision?" Only Alexander could override it, and he was absent from the vote. Personal leave, apparently. Her boss gave her a knowing look that made Beth wonder if he suspected the nature of her relationship with Alexander. She didn't want to use her personal connection to influence business decisions, but this project was too important to abandon without a fight. During her lunch break, she went to Alexander's office, knocking tentatively on his door. His face lit up when he saw her, but quickly grew serious as she explained the situation. "I was planning to address this first thing tomorrow," he said. 3 board members have been pushing back against the community initiatives, saying they don't provide enough return on investment. "But these programs change lives," Beth argued passionately. "They provide opportunities to people who would never have them otherwise. How can they measure that in dollars?" Alexander smiled sadly. "That's exactly the argument I've been making for years. But business is business to some people." He reached for her hand. "I'll handle it, Beth. I promise." "I'm not asking because of us," she felt compelled to clarify. "I'd be fighting for this project no matter what." "I know," he assured her. "It's one of the things I love about you." The next day, Alexander called an emergency board meeting. Beth wasn't invited, but she heard from colleagues that it was tense, with raised voices echoing through the executive floor. By afternoon, word had spread that the funding had been reinstated, but at a cost. Alexander had agreed to accelerate the international expansion plans to appease the dissenting board members. "He'll be traveling a lot over the next few months," Beth's boss informed her casually. "Just so you're prepared for the additional workload." Beth tried not to show her disappointment. She'd just found Alexander, and now they would be separated. But she understood the demands of his position and was grateful that he'd saved their project. That evening, Alexander came to her apartment, looking tired but satisfied. "You did it," she said, hugging him tightly after her mother had gone to bed. "You saved the community center." "We saved it," he corrected. "Your passion for these projects reminds me why I started them in the first place." He sighed, pulling her to sit beside him on the couch. "But I had to make a compromise. I'll need to spend time in our European and Asian offices, overseeing the expansion personally. How long will you be gone? Beth asked, trying to keep the sadness from her voice. A week here, 2 weeks there. Not continuously. He took her hands in his. I want you to come with me at least for some of the trips. We could extend them, make them part business, part pleasure. The offer was tempting. Beth had never traveled outside the country, had barely left the city. But she had responsibilities here, her job, her mother. I can't leave Mom alone for that long, she said reluctantly. She wouldn't be alone. The building has full-time nursing staff, and we could hire a personal companion for her. Alexander hesitated, then added, or she could come with us sometimes. The change of scenery might be good for her health. Beth was touched by his thoughtfulness. Let me talk to her about it. Later that week, Alexander left for his first trip, a 10-day visit to their London and Paris offices. Beth threw herself into her work, keeping busy to distract from his absence. They talked every day by video call, Alexander showing her the cities he visited, promising to take her there someday soon. Then a week into his trip, Beth's mother took a turn for the worse. Her condition, stable for months, suddenly deteriorated. The doctor said it was a viral infection, dangerous given her compromised immune system. Beth took emergency leave from work, staying by her mother's bedside day and night. She didn't tell Alexander how serious it was, not wanting to worry him when he was dealing with important business matters. But as her mother's condition worsened, Beth began to fear the worst. On the 9th day of Alexander's trip, the doctor took Beth aside. We need to prepare for the possibility that she won't recover, he said gently. Her system is too weak to fight off the infection. Beth felt her world crumbling. After everything they'd been through, after finally finding stability and happiness, to lose her mother now seemed unbearably cruel. She finally called Alexander, her voice breaking as she told him the situation. I'm coming home immediately, he said without hesitation. I'll be on the next flight. True to his word, Alexander arrived at the hospital less than 24 hours later, still in his travel clothes, his face lined with concern. He gathered Beth into his arms as she broke down, sobbing against his chest. I can't lose her, she cried. She's all I've had for so long. I know, love, he soothed, stroking her hair. But you're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Alexander stayed with her at the hospital, using his influence to ensure her mother received the best possible care. He brought in specialists, explored experimental treatments. For 3 days they watched and waited, hoping for improvement. On the 4th day, Beth's mother opened her eyes, her fever finally broken. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. It's a miracle, one of the nurses whispered to Beth. We thought we were going to lose her. Beth looked at Alexander, who had barely left her side through the ordeal. Thank you, she said. For everything. Don't thank me, he replied, squeezing her hand. Just seeing her improve is enough. As her mother recovered, Beth realized something important. Alexander had proven himself not just in the good times, but in the hardest moments as well. He had dropped everything to be with her, had used every resource at his disposal to help, had supported her emotionally when she was at her lowest. This wasn't just love, it was partnership in the truest sense. And Beth knew with absolute certainty that she wanted to spend her life with this man. One evening, as they sat together in her mother's hospital room while she slept, Beth turned to Alexander. I want to go with you, she said. On your next trip. And the one after that. Wherever you go, I want to be there. Alexander's eyes lit up. Are you sure? What about your work? Your mother? Mom is getting better. The doctors say she can be released next week, and the nursing staff at the building can monitor her recovery. Beth took his hands. As for work, maybe there's a way I can continue the community projects remotely at least part of the time. We could make that happen, Alexander agreed eagerly. I've been thinking about expanding our community initiatives to the international offices anyway. You could lead that effort. Beth smiled, feeling a new sense of purpose. I'd like that. Using what we've learned here to help communities around the world. Alexander pulled her close, kissing her forehead. You continue to amaze me, Beth Carson. Just when I think I couldn't love you more, you prove me wrong. As they sat together, making plans for their future, Beth felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, her mother's health, the demands of their work, the complications of their different backgrounds, but she knew they would face it all together. For a girl who had stood alone in the rain just months ago, it was more than she had ever dared to hope for. It was everything. 3 months later, Beth found herself standing on a balcony in Santorini, Greece, watching the sunset paint the white buildings and blue sea in shades of gold and pink. It was their fourth international trip together, and each one had been more incredible than the last. Beth's mother had recovered fully and was thriving with her new companion, a kind woman named Helen who had become more friend than caretaker. They video-called regularly, her mother delighting in hearing about Beth's adventures and seeing the beautiful places she visited. The community initiatives were expanding globally, with Beth leading the effort. She had discovered a talent for adapting their programs to different cultures and contexts, working with local leaders to address specific needs. Alexander had given her full authority over the projects, proud of her growing expertise and confidence. Their relationship had deepened with each passing day. The initial passion had settled into something richer, more enduring, a partnership of equals despite their different starting points. Alexander valued her perspective, her practical wisdom born of struggle. Beth appreciated his vision, his generosity, his unwavering support of her growth. Tonight, Alexander had been unusually quiet, almost nervous. He had arranged a private dinner on their villa's terrace, with candles and flowers and a view that took Beth's breath away. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, turning from the railing to find him watching her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "How beautiful you are," he said, moving to stand beside her. "Inside and out." Beth smiled, still not entirely used to his compliments despite the months together. She was wearing a flowing white dress he'd bought her in Paris, her hair loose around her shoulders, her skin tanned from days in the Mediterranean sun. "And how lucky I am," Alexander continued, taking her hands in his, "to have found you that rainy night. To have you in my life now." There was something in his voice that made Beth's pulse quicken. "I'm the lucky one," she said softly. Alexander shook his head. "No, Beth. I was successful before I met you, yes. I had money, power, influence. But I was lonely in ways I didn't even recognize until you showed me what was missing." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Beth's breath caught as he dropped to one knee before her. "You showed me what really matters," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Not business success or wealth but connection. Purpose. Love." He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "Elizabeth Carson, will you marry me?" Beth felt tears spring to her eyes as she looked down at this powerful man kneeling before her, offering her his heart. It was so far from where she'd been less than a year ago, standing alone in the rain with nothing but determination keeping her going. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Alexander. I'll marry you." His face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the diamond catching the last rays of the setting sun. Alexander stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and promise of their future together. Later, as they lay in bed, Beth gazed at her ring in the moonlight streaming through the window. "What are you thinking?" Alexander asked, propping himself up on one elbow to look at her. "About how far I've come," she said honestly. "From that girl in the rain to here. Sometimes it still doesn't feel real." "It's real," he assured her, kissing her shoulder. "You earned every bit of it with your hard work, your intelligence, your heart." Beth turned to face him. "I want to do something special with the money from our wedding." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "What kind of special?" "I want to create a foundation," she said, the idea taking shape as she spoke. "To help single parents in crisis situations. People like my mom and me who just need support to get through the hardest times." "That's a wonderful idea," Alexander said, his eyes warm with pride. "We could set it up as part of the company's charitable arm, or as something separate if you prefer." "Separate, I think," Beth said. "But working in partnership with the company programs." They talked late into the night, planning the foundation, discussing wedding details, dreaming of their future together. As Beth finally drifted off to sleep in Alexander's arms, she felt a deep contentment. Her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined, but she had transformed too, growing stronger, more confident, more ready to give back to others who struggled as she once had. The journey from that rainy night to this moonlit embrace had been extraordinary. But Beth knew it was just the beginning of the life they would build together. A life of purpose, partnership, and love. The 6 months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Beth divided her time between planning their special day, developing her new foundation, and continuing her work with the global community initiatives. Alexander supported her every step of the way, proud of her growing confidence and leadership. They decided on a December wedding, with both intimate and grand elements that reflected their journey together. The ceremony would be small, with only close friends and family, held in the historic chapel where Alexander's parents had married. The reception, however, would be a larger celebration at the Reynolds Enterprises headquarters, transformed for the evening into an elegant winter wonderland. Beth's mother, now fully recovered and thriving, threw herself into the wedding preparations with enthusiasm. She and Beth shopped for the perfect dress together, both of them tearful when Beth emerged from the dressing room in a simple but stunning gown that seemed made for her. "Your father would be so proud," her mother said, squeezing Beth's hand. "Of the woman you've become, of the life you've built." Beth thought often of her father in the days leading up to the wedding, the hard-working man who had died too young, leaving them struggling but never defeated. She wished he could see her now, could meet Alexander, could know that she had found happiness and security beyond anything they had dreamed possible. On the night before the wedding, Beth stayed in her old apartment with her mother, honoring tradition despite Alexander's protests about being separated. "It's just one night," she had teased him, "and then we have the rest of our lives." She lay awake late into the night, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From that desperate night in the rain to tomorrow's walk down the aisle, it seemed both an eternity and the blink of an eye. The morning dawned clear and cold, the city dusted with a light snow that made everything look magical. Beth's preparation suite at the hotel near the chapel was filled with flowers, champagne, and the excited chatter of her small bridal party. Jessica Thompson, who had become a close friend, and two colleagues from the community outreach department who had welcomed her so warmly that first day. "Are you nervous?" Jessica asked as the makeup artist put the finishing touches on Beth's face. "Strangely, no," Beth replied with a smile. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." By the time Beth stepped into her dress, her mother was already dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "You look like a princess," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Beth hugged her carefully, mindful of her makeup and hair. "I feel like one. But more importantly, I feel like myself, just the best version." The drive to the chapel was quiet, Beth's thoughts turning to Alexander, imagining him waiting for her at the altar. When they arrived, her mother squeezed her hand one last time before being escorted inside. Beth stood at the chapel doors, her simple bouquet of white roses trembling slightly in her hands. The wedding planner gave her a reassuring smile, then signaled for the doors to open. The chapel was beautiful, lit with hundreds of candles that cast a warm glow over the gathered guests. But Beth saw only Alexander, standing tall and handsome at the altar, his eyes fixed on her with such love that she felt it like a physical embrace. She walked slowly toward him, each step bringing her closer to their shared future. When she reached him, he took her hands in his fingers warm and steady. "You're breathtaking," he whispered, his voice reverent. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with personal vows they had written for each other. Alexander spoke of finding her in the rain, of knowing even then that she was special, of the joy and purpose she had brought to his life. Beth spoke of his kindness, his strength, his unwavering support, and the love that had transformed her world. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Alexander's kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of all that was to come. The guests applauded as they walked back down the aisle together, no longer two separate people but a united partnership. The reception was a celebration beyond anything Beth could have imagined a year ago. The Reynolds Building atrium had been transformed into an elegant winter scene, with crystal decorations catching the light like ice, tables adorned with white flowers and silver candles, a dance floor that seemed to glow from within. Beth and Alexander moved through the evening in a haze of happiness, dancing, greeting guests, sharing quiet moments alone whenever they could steal away. "Mrs. Reynolds," Alexander murmured during their first dance, holding her close. "That's going to take some getting used to," Beth laughed softly. "We have plenty of time," he replied, his eyes full of promise. As the night wore on, Beth found herself standing alone for a moment, watching Alexander across the room as he chatted with some business associates. He looked up as if sensing her gaze and smiled, a private smile just for her. Jessica appeared at her side, following her gaze. "You got your fairy tale after all." Beth thought about the term fairy tale, with its implication of fantasy, of unreality. What she and Alexander had built together was anything but that. It was real, solid, built on mutual respect and understanding, on shared values and complementary strengths. "Not a fairy tale," Beth corrected gently. "Something better. Something real." Jessica squeezed her arm in understanding. "The best kind of love story." Later, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, 3 weeks split between the Maldives and Japan, Alexander pulled Beth aside for a moment of privacy. "I have a wedding gift for you," he said, handing her a thick envelope. Inside was a document bearing the official seal of the Reynolds Foundation. Beth read it slowly, her eyes widening. "Alexander, this is the first major grant from our foundation," he confirmed. $10 million to establish a comprehensive support program for single parents in crisis, housing, childcare, job training, healthcare. Everything you and your mother needed back then. Tears filled Beth's eyes. "This will change so many lives. Just like you changed mine." Alexander cupped her face gently. "This is just the beginning, Beth. Together we're going to do so much good in this world." As they walked out to the waiting car amid a shower of rose petals and well wishes, Beth felt a profound sense of coming full circle. From that desperate night in the rain to this perfect evening, she had not just found love and security for herself, but the means to extend that same helping hand to others. As Alexander helped her into the car, he leaned down to kiss her once more. "Happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, meaning every word. The car pulled away, carrying them toward their new life together, a life built on love, purpose, and the knowledge that sometimes, even the most unlikely beginnings can lead to the most beautiful endings. 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter filled the garden of the Reynolds country house, a beautiful estate just outside the city that they had purchased 3 years ago. Beth stood on the patio, watching with a smile as Alexander chased their 3-year-old daughter Emma around the lawn, her curly dark hair bouncing as she ran from her father with delighted squeals. Nearby, Beth's mother sat in a comfortable chair in the shade, holding their 6-month-old son Michael, who was contentedly chewing on a toy. At 60, her mother looked healthier and happier than Beth could ever remember seeing her, her role as grandmother bringing her immense joy. "He's getting so big," said a voice beside Beth. She turned to see Jessica, who had become one of her closest friends over the years. "I know," Beth agreed, watching her son's chubby legs kick with excitement as his sister ran by. "They both are. It's going by so fast." The garden was full of friends gathered for Emma's birthday party, colleagues from work, neighbors, other parents from Emma's preschool. It was a far cry from the lonely existence Beth had known before meeting Alexander, and she took a moment to appreciate the fullness of her life now. "The foundation's new center opens next week, right?" Jessica asked, sipping her lemonade. Beth nodded, pride warming her chest. "Yes, our 5th one. This one focuses specifically on healthcare for children from low-income families." She glanced at her mother. "Seeing Mom struggle to get proper medical care for herself made me realize how essential that support is." In the 5 years since their wedding, the Reynolds Foundation had grown beyond Beth's initial vision, helping thousands of families across the country. She now worked full-time as its director, while Alexander continued to run Reynolds Enterprises, though with a much stronger focus on social responsibility than ever before. They had found a balance that worked for their family, both pursuing meaningful work while prioritizing time together. Alexander had scaled back his international travel, delegating more to capable executives he'd mentored. Beth had created a flexible work environment at the foundation that allowed her to be present for their children while still driving the mission forward. "Beth, come quick." Alexander called from the lawn, interrupting her thoughts. "Michael's trying to say Mama?" She hurried over to where her mother was now holding Michael up, his little face scrunched in concentration. Ma," he babbled, reaching for Beth with pudgy hands. Beth scooped him up, tears pricking her eyes as her heart swelled with love. "That's right, sweetheart. Mama's here." Alexander wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling both her and their son close. Emma tugged at her father's pant leg until he lifted her up as well, completing their family circle. "Group hug," Emma declared, her father's penchant for grand statements already evident in her young personality. Beth met Alexander's eyes over their children's heads, seeing in them the same wonder and gratitude she felt. After 5 years of marriage, their connection had only deepened, weathering the challenges of parenthood, the demands of their work, and the occasional clash of their different perspectives. They had learned to compromise, to listen, to balance each other's strengths and weaknesses. Alexander had taught Beth to dream bigger, to trust more readily, to embrace joy without fear. She had taught him patience, practicality, and the quiet dignity of ordinary moments. "I love you," he mouthed silently, his expression tender. "I love you too," she replied, shifting Michael to one arm so she could reach out and touch Alexander's face. Later that evening, after the party had ended and the children were asleep, Beth and Alexander sat on the patio, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "Do you ever think about that night?" Alexander asked, his fingers laced with hers. "The night we met?" "Often," Beth admitted. "Sometimes it still doesn't seem quite real, how different my life is now from what it was then." "Different, yes," Alexander agreed. But you're still the same extraordinary woman who caught my attention in the rain. Strong, compassionate, determined. Beth smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. And you're still the same man who stopped to help a stranger, even though it was raining and you were wearing an expensive suit. Best decision I ever made, he said, kissing the top of her head. Mine too, Beth replied. Accepting your help that night, taking the job, loving you, best decisions I ever made. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the night settling around them. Beth thought about all they had accomplished together, the communities they'd helped transform, the foundation they'd built, the family they were raising. From that desperate moment in the rain to this peaceful evening under the stars, the journey had been extraordinary. What are you thinking about? Alexander asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. About how sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead to the best, she replied. If I hadn't lost my job that night, if it hadn't been raining, if you hadn't been there at that exact moment, I'd have found you some other way, Alexander said with certainty. I truly believe that. Beth smiled at his confidence. Maybe you're right. Maybe some people are just meant to find each other. I know I was meant to find you, he said, pulling her close. You're the love of my life, Beth Reynolds. The best thing that ever happened to me. And you're mine, she whispered, kissing him under the starry sky. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the garden Alexander had designed especially for Beth bloomed with night-scented flowers. Beyond the gates, the foundation centers they had built together offered shelter and hope to families in need. Their story hadn't ended with wedding bells and happily ever after. It had continued, growing richer and deeper with each passing day, each challenge overcome, each joy shared. It wasn't a fairy tale, it was better. It was real, built on love, respect, and the belief that everyone deserved a chance to transform their life. As Beth and Alexander walked hand in hand back to their home, she thought about the young woman standing alone in the rain all those years ago. If she could have glimpsed this future then, would she have believed it possible? Perhaps not. But Alexander had seen possibility in her from the very beginning. He had seen past her circumstances to the woman she truly was, the woman she could become with just a little help, a little faith, a little love. And in return, Beth had seen the man behind the wealth and power, the kind, compassionate heart that yearned to make a difference. Together they had built something greater than either could have created alone, a partnership based on love, respect, and shared purpose. Their story had begun with a billionaire and a poor girl caught in the rain. It had become so much more, a testament to the power of love to transform not just two lives, but countless others through their shared vision and commitment. As they reached their bedroom, Alexander pulled Beth into his arms one more time. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. For what? She asked, looking up at him. For being brave enough to trust me that night. For loving me for myself, not what I could give you. For building this life with me. Beth reached up to touch his face, feeling the same flutter in her heart that she had felt the first time he smiled at her. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me when no one else did. Their kiss was both familiar and thrilling, a reminder of all they had shared and all that was still to come. From unlikely beginnings, they had created a love story for the ages, not perfect, not magical, but real and enduring. And as they held each other in the quiet of their home, surrounded by the family they had created and the good they had done in the world, both Beth and Alexander knew that they had found something rare and precious, a love that transformed not just their own lives, but reached out to change the world around them, one heart at a time.